afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So I have some good news. The good news is that I finally finished the first book of Japanese from Zero. I finished it today while I was on my lunch period? No, not lunch. It was my second break. So I am now done with this. I think I technically still have one video left to watch on their YouTube channel. But all that is is reiterations of the stuff that you're going over in the book. They add in some things that you don't see in the book, but for the most part, it's just a reiteration of what you did. So now I can move on to book 2. So this is pretty exciting for me because I've had these books for a couple of years now, and am just now getting around to actually doing them all the way through. So. And it also makes me feel really good because as you're getting to the end of this book, open up one of them. It will pull up, or it will have an exercise like this, where I know you probably can't see this, but you're supposed to. It has some phrases in Japanese or some conversations in Japanese here that are written entirely in hiragana, because at this point you've learned it all, and you have to translate them into English. And I was able, and then over here is the same thing, except it's in English. You have to translate it into Japanese and write it in hiragana. So this is really exciting for me because I was able to actually just do that. There's a couple of words that I had to look up, but and that's one of the things that I have to work on is just my level of vocabulary. And through that whole thing, as I was handwriting notes, I took 55 pages of notes. Of handwritten notes, which was a lot of me just writing down the vocabulary and things like that, and writing down some of the rules that it was going over and things like that. So that's pretty exciting. But that wasn't what I wanted to mainly talk about today. That was more of just a here's where I am. So what I actually wanted to talk about today was that I've found is an interesting word. But I've started watching some videos on YouTube from a couple of different guys. One is Matt vs. Japan, is what the channel is called, and the other channel is called Dogen. And watching these two channels made me realize something that I kind of wanted to address. So what it made me realize that both of these channels are for learning Japanese, and it's not to teach you Japanese, but it's to kind of walk you through some of the processes and talk a bit about how they learned Japanese, and then kind of give tips on how to learn certain things and different things like that. Like Matt from Matt vs. Japan partnered with somebody else, and they made their own kind of study method. It's called the mass immersion approach, and they have a website and everything. And I had actually gone and looked at that, and that's actually one of the things that I've kind of adopted a little bit. I'm not changing how I'm studying. I'm still solely studying from this, but I've adopted a couple of things. And one of the things that he encourages is, it says, mass immersion. Now, what he means by that is he encourages people to go from the day they start learning Japanese. He encourages you to go in, or whatever language, to go in and start watching animes, in the case of Japanese, animes and Japanese dramas, and in other languages you can watch movies and dramas and whatever in that target language, and watch it without the subtitles, as well as listen to audiobooks in the target language, and just all sorts of different things like that, so that you have a constant flow of this language. And it's not just listening to it while you're working like I do. It's in my case, watching anime all the time. And I've permanently turned off my subtitles for now. Unlike Netflix, I've permanently turned off the subtitles. And one of the things that does, and one of the things that I've realized that it's doing, is I'm starting to be able to pick apart the sounds of what he's how do you say it, to parse the language. So I'm starting to hear more and more individual words, rather than it just sounding almost like a bit of a garbled mess. I knew that they were actually speaking in Japanese, but you can't really separate the words because you don't know where the words are. And because I've been studying and because I've been listening enough, I have now become able to separate some of those sounds. And so, as I was watching I think I'm watching Seven Deadly Sins again right now. And as I was watching that earlier, I was able to pick apart some of the words that they were saying. So I've been kind of adopted some of that. I've been doing that, and I've listened to, I've found some Japanese audiobooks that I've been listening to at work. And then Dogen, he's really fun because he lives and works in Japan. And all of his stuff on his channel is like teaching you stuff, but it's also it's kind of teaching you through comedy. And he's teaching on his YouTube channel. At least he's mostly teaching some cultural stuff. He has a Patreon where he actually full on teaches you Japanese, but he's mostly goes over like different cultural things. And one of the things I want to say about these is, as great as they are, and there's a lot of channels like this. I've watched a few of them. There's a lot of them. But with channels like these, none of them are bad by any means. Like, you always have to take them with a grain of salt, because what method of studying works for one person and learning a language works for one person may not work for another person, may not work for this person, may not work for that person. So you always have to take it with a grain of salt. But regardless of that, they are all very good. Oh, mostly. But one of the problems that I've noticed is that, because I kind of ran into this for a little bit, is that when you're watching something like that, and you're hearing how these guys like Matt from Matt vs. Japan and Dogen, they talked recently about, they interviewed each other on how they learned Japanese, and like they talk a little bit about how long it took them and like different things like that. And watching things like that can be discouraging. So you just have to be careful, because it can, when you're watching them and they're like, oh, it took me this long to get to this point in Japanese, and it took me this long to get to this point. If you're already at a point where you're, a couple of years in and you aren't even at the first point that they're at, it can be really discouraging. And so you just have to be careful with that, because everybody learns at their own pace, and so you can't judge yourself off of somebody else, because this person might be an amazing learner and be able to pick things up really, really fast. And so learning a language like that might take them less time. They might learn a language to full fluency in like a year and a half. Whereas this person over here could study for like 5 years and still not have reached full fluency. It just depends on how you learn. And it also depends on how much time you have. Because as I was listening to specifically those two channels, is that they were devoting hours every day. I think Matt vs. Japan at one point, he was devoting, it was somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a day, per day, solely to studying Japanese. And for somebody like me, I can't do that. I don't have that kind of time. Yesterday was the best that I've been able to do in a while. Yesterday, so today's Sunday that I'm recording this, and this video should come out, is Sunday. Yesterday, when I was studying, Anna had gone off with her mother, and so I was at home with Aiden, and I was able to study straight out of the book. Like, I didn't do Busu or anything. Well, I did later, but I was studying out of the book, and I did about 3 hours, maybe 3.5, and that's as much as I could get, because I have to take care of the kid. I have to cook food for him. I have to cook food for myself. And I have to take care of, I have to take the dog out for walks. Like, there's all sorts of different things, and then on a normal day like today, I had to go to work. I was at work from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m. So you don't always have that much time. And then once I'm home from work, then I have to take care of the animals, and I have to go, then we have to go and pick up Aiden and all sorts of stuff. So if you don't have that much time during the day, if you only have, an hour at most, or an hour and a half at most, to dedicate to learning Japanese every day, it's going to take you a little longer. And so watching something like what those guys did can be a little discouraging. But you just have to remember just to always keep your head up about it. That's kind of what I did for myself. So I was like, you know what? Cool, that was great for them. I'm not going to be able to do that because I don't have the time. But I will still be able to get there. I can still progress fairly quickly if I do it right. And so far, I feel like I have been. I mean, I had the lapses, but so far I feel like I've been doing pretty well. And one of the things that I think is going to start helping me a lot is watching more anime, listening to more audiobooks, things like that. and learning to hear the language, learning to recognize the patterns. Because one of the things that I've always been good at is listening, and so I'm able to listen to things and pick them apart. And so I feel like that will help me to pick up the language faster. I've always been a slightly fast learner as well, so that kind of got that going for me. So yeah, I've been trying to not let myself get discouraged by watching those. Like, I'm still watching Matt vs. Japan and Dogen and all these other, and obviously the Japanese from Zero channel and all these other channels of people that speak Japanese or are, whether or not they're talking about learning Japanese or whether they're just, speaking in Japanese or anything like that. I've been trying not to let that kind of thing discourage me, because I will get there. Like, I've come to grips with the fact that I will get there. It just may not be at the time that I wanted it to, unless I can, make a few changes and be able to study a little more and different things like that. So, like I said, I'm going to start watching more anime. One of the things that Matt vs. Japan talks about in his mass immersion approach is active listening, is getting a lot of active listening in, because passive listening is great because you can just, like in my case at work, I just have my headphone in and I just have an audiobook playing. I'm listening to Kokoro right now, and you can just have that playing all day. He suggests just having a dedicated MP3 player and just like dangling your headphones down, and just like every once in a while, just at random, when you have time, just put a headphone in and listen for a while you're doing other stuff. And but I think for me the biggest thing is going to be getting more active listening time, watching more anime in straight Japanese, watching some Japanese dramas. There was a show on Netflix that I liked, Million Yen Women, I think is what it was called, that I had watched before, and it was pretty funny and I really enjoyed it. And so it's watching something like that without the subtitles and different things like that. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to sit down and talk about that. Like I said, don't let that kind of thing discourage you. Like, you'll get there, regardless of how bad you think you're doing. I guarantee you, there's somebody else who thinks they're doing worse. But the reality is, neither of you are. Maybe you're learning slightly incorrectly. That's entirely a possibility. But that's easy to fix. That's really easy to fix. But yeah, the key is just don't let yourself get discouraged, because when you get discouraged, that's when you fall off the bandwagon and you take 2 weeks to get through like a lesson and a half or something like that. I did four lessons yesterday, 3.5 lessons yesterday. But that's when you start to do something like that, is when you get discouraged, you start to fall behind in your studying, because you even just subconsciously, because consciously you might be like, oh yeah, I'll still study, but subconsciously you're just kind of defeated. And so you just kind of got to avoid that. But yeah, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on my progress. Like I said, I'm going to start book 2 probably either sometime today, or I'll start it tomorrow. It'll be able to start learning katakana, and then book 3 up there will get me into kanji. But we'll see how this gets me, and just kind of wanted to go over those few things with you. So until next week, don't forget to thank the Phoenicians.
Let's get some sun, baby, it's time to go. All we need to put on is the radio. I can feel